Digital communication, you all know, you're studying this, how the digital revolution has literally changed the world. Not only the way people consume fashion and luxury, but also the way people approach it. So it's not only about e-commerce or buying and selling and a change in logistics, but it's especially, I believe, and hence, Jonathan, it's especially about how the brands manage to change the narrative and speak the language of societies. It's not top-down anymore, it's bottom-up, you have to listen to the people. Anyway, I believe that Gucci has done it better than any other brand in the fashion industry. The figures of Gucci in the past 3 years show it. It's not only about an incredible creative director and a great CEO, but it's also about the language that Gucci has started talking in the digital era. So before I ask you to explain us what you do, I would like to underline that it's not going to be about Gucci per se, but it's about how Gucci used the media to get where they are, and so talk about the actual digital communication. But it would be nice to understand what does your title mean and what are your responsibilities within the company.
So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades within marketing and communications, but my team focuses on 4 key areas. So one of the first is called product marketing. And so product marketing is rather unique to Gucci specifically in the sense that we're not specific to a marketing touch point. So we use all the marketing and communication touch points, and we're really closely linked to different functions outside of the communications department, including our merchandising, retail, Gucci.com business units, the design office. So we're really almost like a connective tissue between the organization. And simply put, we have a very simple core mission that distinguishes product marketing initiatives. One is our campaigns are designed to speak to customers as our primary audience. In fashion, there's a lot of different activities that aren't always targeted to our customers or thinking about your customers first and foremost and understanding their perceptions. So we're always thinking about the customer first, and then the second is that we're tied to a more specific business objective, whether it's launching a product, creating more awareness around a category. So it's very simple, customer first tied to a business objective. The second area—
Which is what marketing should be, actually.
Yeah. The second area is called partner marketing, and it's more specific to some of our business operations. So when we work with wholesale accounts, so if we run a campaign with Net-a-Porter, how our outlet business units can also market Gucci products. So there's a variety of different sort of partners that we work with that we need to help co-curate the messaging around the brand. So that's one of the other divisions. Then on the other side is where I get into more customer and consumer-centric sort of activities. So consumer analytics and insights is underneath me, and so that's exactly what it sounds like. Our team has access to our data and produces not only sort of practical dashboards and KPIs for the companies, but they're also the ones who can look at customer profiles. They work on how we segment our segmentation strategy for our customers. And then the fourth team is called consumer campaign. And that's actually sort of a hotbed of a lot of really fun technology. The team currently oversees our email marketing program, our digital surveys to clients, how we send SMS out, text messages out to clients around the world. But they're also working on a lot of new technologies that sort of take our amazing and creative content and are using technology to serve increasingly personalized messages and marketing campaigns to clients based on the data we have on them.
Okay, so when you say are using technology to do that, it means that through technology you can find out what they want?
Well, or
what they stand for?
So from our consumer analytics team, we're able to actually get a great deal of information, and we can make assumptions on different audiences within our customer base. So even a customer who might have purchased 3 pairs of the same shoe, it's like, okay, we know something about this customer. They love this one style. That's already a very simple insight to then activate on. But unless you're sort of looking at your audiences and looking at customer behavior to find those patterns to then activate creative thinking, it's it's a little bit difficult. So the analytics and insights team has to look through the different patterns and find audiences. And then with different technology tools, we can start to begin to implement and deploy different customer journeys. And so we're in the piloting phase of this new technology, and yeah.
So are you telling us that all the data inform creativity?
No, not that the data informs creativity, but if one of the unique things about Gucci is that as much as we always will be a product and retail company, over the last 4 years, we've also equally become a content company. But so within our content suite, we have so much messaging, from a campaign on men's tailoring with Harry Styles to a beautiful jewelry campaign to whether or not we're looking at lookbook imagery versus our institutional advertising. And then that's not even counting all the digital editorial content created by our social media team. So if you line up that asset suite, and the different messages associated with it, there's so many ways that you can pull from that to then deploy to the right audiences at any given time. So it's not that the behavior is driving the creative. It's more about how do we match all the creative we have with different audiences at the right time, also within their customer lifecycle. So if we know a customer has recently purchased with us and that they're not likely to purchase again for the next 4 or 5 months, we should sort of tone down commercial messaging and sort of give them a brand hug with fun, creative messaging. And we have this massive suite of content now to sort of say, okay, given where this customer is within their life cycle, let's change from a more commercial tone, talking about newness and product, to talk about more fun, inspiration. And that's always the balance of what we do in sort of product marketing. It's never one or the other, it's always finding the right balance, but we can now pay a little bit closer attention to where our customer is in the life cycle.
But how do you give, when you say we can give that customer something more, like lifestyle-ish or whatever, what do you mean by give?
So it comes down to the different customer touch points that we activate. So, do we want to change the tone of our email campaigns that we're sending out and give them more sort of background, behind the scenes look? If for our social media advertising, what are those customers being targeted with? What's the messaging look like? We can also, and we're starting to test with this new technology, we can send tasks to their preferred sales associate. So, there's different points of activation, and we're looking at how we can orchestrate them in a way that's a bit more reactive to what we know about the customer. But then there are plenty of customers that we don't really know enough about that we have to cast a wide net and learn.
For that, there is the brand in general, I guess.
Exactly.
Because this is really down to the specific, and it's analytical marketing, which is very important, and the digital era is open so many possibilities, the sky's the limit. However, one of the things that I notice as, in general from outside is what Gucci has done with its language. I mean, you were there through the change, from the previous creative director to the newish now CEO and creative director, and a totally different language, a totally different style, something much more modern. And the figures say that Gucci could increase the number of millennials, the famous young people, actually acquiring goods. So not only being fan, but also being customer of 100%, 200%. I mean, the figures are outstanding. And that, I think, goes down to the language.
Yeah.
Can we know a little bit more about
yeah,
that?
of
I mean,
course.
was that a strategy, sitting down and saying, we need to talk to millennial, or it was just a natural?
No, it wasn't. And if you look at our strategy, we're not focused on any particular age group. Because everyone always asks me, which demographic do you focus on? And I always give this sort of story. Like, if you tell a good joke, everyone around the table should laugh. Not just the young kids, not just your parents, not just your grandparents. If it's a good joke, everyone around the table will smile. It's the same thing with brand language. If it's a good story, you can hook in everyone. And at the time of the brand repositioning, we spent a lot of time sort of internalizing and completely redefining our brand platform at Gucci, including how we would eventually communicate. This was even before we saw Alessandro's first collection. So we went...
Alessandro Michele, the creative director, in case someone didn't know.
And so luckily, what sort of blossomed over time, and as we got more sure of our new voice, and was that what Alessandro does creatively is so layered and so rich, and he also incorporates our house codes, but also with new symbols that are very relevant, and he has a very inclusive approach to sort of beauty, fashion, and creativity that's really harnessed around this idea of self-expression. And so that inherently, and what he does inherently, resonates with the millennial audience. But it wasn't in the reverse. It was more, we've really been benefited from sort of this notion of self-expression and how that can inspire different people. And so over time, what we've seen is that this way of speaking creatively has really resonated repeatedly with the audience. But it's true, in luxury, you start with creativity first, not in the reverse. So, and that's really the approach we take at Gucci.
You make it sound easy.
It's not.
But, well, you know, I grew up in fashion and in communication in a time where DNA was the master of everything and the logo could not be touched. And, you know, all these things that were like framing communications and creativity within a frame that sometimes were a little bit of a prison. And then now Gucci has like a tiger as a symbol, or the word love, and Gucci, Gacchi with a Y, like they say in America, and Gucci is a verb, I feel Gucci, Guccified, and whatever, you know, you name it. And that, I think, is the perfect situation for marketeers and creatives. So I guess that the fact that everybody has become so brilliant creatively inside is probably also contagious. It comes from the top.
Yeah, well, there's an openness to creativity, but it goes through a very, you know, as open as we are, to have a consistent brand voice and approach also globally, we have a system internally that goes through a very strict curation process. So, you know, what might have been a way in the past of how some fashion brands were operating to very, very strict codes, I would say we still have that operating mentality. It's just we now are more open about different sources of creativity and collaboration that then go through a very strict curation process to make sure that everything feels relevant and authentic to our brand, and that it's not just something that's a gimmick or something that's coming from left field. So even though, you know, there is this degree of flexibility in what we're doing, it is going through a very rigorous curation.
Well, that brings me to something that, especially in the digital era, has become more and more important. It's authenticity, and it's one of the words that were at the beginning of your thing. I believe that today, if you're not authentic, but you try to be someone else, and everybody has copied Gucci in communication, in styling, in everything in the past 4 years, then it's creepy. It's like, it gives you goosebumps. And Gucci is very authentic, and I've spoken 2 years ago about one of your collaborators, Coco Capitan, the photographer / poet, whatever, and she told me that, you know, you just get a phone call and Alessandro Michele calls you in Rome, and they give you a room and they say, do whatever you want. But then you have to, whatever is your creativity, you have to exchange with him and make it into something that is authentically Gucci or good for Gucci, which could go from playing with the logo to writing poems on walls of Milan, right? So is that what happens? I mean, in collaboration, I would like to know it from inside, actually, the meaning of collaboration and authenticity, and the use of it in your data and how you send it out to clients, customers, whatever.
So I do think the company has become really unique in terms of how it collaborates and giving people the freedom to work with us. But again, you know, the people that we're inviting to collaborate with us are people we believe in. So, and a lot of this comes from Alessandro directly. It's not coming from anywhere else in the company. So
it's not a marketing research.
No. So the fact that they're choosing partners that they believe in, I think, and this is pure conjecture because I'm not involved in that side of the process, but it's sort of common knowledge. By choosing people you believe in and artists you appreciate, if you then give them the freedom to do their thing, it works out better versus inviting someone in that you're sort of going to control and manipulate their vision. So it works on all sides, but by choosing true creative collaborators, and I think that's where the magic is happening. And then from us, the storytelling from a marketing perspective is always so rich because you have, these great people. Some of these are young artists, some of them are, other artists who have really significant careers, and the storytelling is always fascinating, and getting to have a different angle or a different perspective to then showcase your, to your customers and to people who just love the brand is always exciting. And Coco's a great example. So for Coco Capitan, I remember first hearing about her when we were looking into new photography options when we were relaunching Gucci.com. And then that was the first time I was exposed to her body of work in the marketing department was through e-commerce photography. And then it just blossomed organically from meeting a great creative that everyone believes in.
And by the way, a very young person, because one other thing that you guys do is giving a floor to foster the creativity of very young people, unknown people. Usually the top brands in the luxury industry, they only work with top names, the same 5 photographers, the same 3 stylists, the same 2 art director or whatever, and whilst Gucci is going out and picking this, new talent that will be the future, right?
No, and that's super fun, and I also think that's one of the ways, that wasn't a strategy I think that was put in place to target millennials. That's not how we work. It was sort of part of the creative process. And then I think that also then opens up all these sub-communities around each of these artists to then engage with our brand in a new way. So, each of these different people that we touch have communities and groupings around them. And so then it has an echo effect also, bringing the brand into other people's lives. And I think that also, this notion of these artistic collaborators and the community that's been created has also really resonated strongly with younger audiences.
Yeah, I interviewed your CEO recently, and he said one thing that resonated a lot with me, and he said, changing culture it can't be a mandate. It cannot be a strategic objective. It has to happen over time. And one thing he did, and you guys did, is to have this shadow executive committee. So there's these young people that are chosen internally to challenge what the top executive in the company decide, right? So my question, I know it's not exactly what you do, but you're an executive in the group, so you would know. It's
and I
like
was part of that group.
Okay, so how does that work? I mean, do younger people really have a voice in, marketing and data analysis, or understanding how to talk a language that in the digital era is relevant? Because you can't talk the same language of a double spread in Vogue. It's a different thing. So is that real? How did it happen? Can you tell us?
Well, the shadow committee is real. I don't even know if that's the real name of it, though. But
that's what he said, so I don't know.
No, we did have this, we called it the Shadow Comex, but it was sort of a very informal name. But it was a group of us who met regularly. We were sort of younger people within the organization who were also very, also operationally on the front lines. So, we were executing projects and driving a lot of things. So a lot of us also could have a very operational perspective too about some of the challenges we might have been facing. And we were able to bubble up different ideas to Marco and have an unfiltered...
Marco is the CEO.
We would have unfiltered access to the CEO in a way that you could just have a conversation being like, this is an idea we had, like, what do you think? And within 5 or 10 minutes of talking and ideating, he would give you feedback about, oh no, that's a good idea, let's move forward with it.
But that's extraordinary. This is a company with what, 20,000 employees? It's not a tiny, startups with 7 people in an office. We're talking, countries and people. So to have the top person, having his door open, and that's, I think, hence the success. But
it's remarkable.
It's not normal.
No. And it wasn't just initiatives like that. There were also a lot of these lunches that were happening with the executives where different people from all over the organizations were having these just an hour and a half lunch with executives where they could bubble up feedback about issues they might be facing or ideas they might want to, harness and potentially empower. And so we had, from the shadow committee to these very informal lunches, all these ideas sort of bubbling up within the organization. And, some of them don't get executed, or some of them were complementary to other initiatives that might have already been underway. And other times these new ideas were greenlit and empowered, and 6 months later something was being piloted and rolled out globally. So that in and of itself became a huge mechanism for harnessing creativity in the sense from like all aspects of the business.
And do you treat differently creativity that goes into digital, so whatever is in the communication, publicity, whatever, and creativity that still goes into the classic communication like print, PR, or store, windows, brick and mortars, whatever? Is that something you
work with? We have, for each one of those marketing and communication touch points or retail touch point like the windows, we have a team of experts who are super at, making the best windows, the best catalogs. Alessandro has also a team around him that is, internally and also externally, partners he works with. Christopher Simmons, based in London, is a really small advertising agency that we work with. They're not really an advertising agency, they're like a creative studio.
They're a creative agency, yeah.
Exactly. And so they work on our advertising campaigns hand in hand with Alessandro, but this is another young team of like super creative people in London, and they work on all of our advertising campaigns. Mm-hmm. So within each of those customer touch points, we really have now assembled some of the industry's best people, but also some of them might be also super young who have been empowered to work with us. And so I would say touch point by touch point, we really have great teams. And again, there's a really strong internal curation process to make sure that everyone is sort of aligned on our messaging and making sure that there's consistency in what we do.
So how do you do that? You meet between departments?
We meet all the time. We email, we text, we call. It's, I wish to say, since we're running so fast and every, fashion is just a rapid cycle. Every three months we're introducing new collections. So it's fun, organized chaos, as I would like to say. And then, we also, within Alessandro's team, we have great points of reference who also help us get feedback.
So Alessandro's team is the designers, the fashion designers.
Yeah, but he also has a team called Creative Services. And sort of they're one of our main touch points in marketing and communications for approvals on anything, that's not product related. So, if...
Does he approve everything? Every campaign?
Almost everything goes through him that is customer facing. That's also pretty remarkable because in addition to being the sole designer for all of our categories, him and his team around him are
100 people behind, right?
But it's also pretty unique if you think about the other brands. We have one vision for all of our categories, and that also I think competitively differentiates us. If you look at some of our main competitors, they have a very distinctly different voice for women's, from men's, and even their store concepts are drastically different.
Dior.
Yeah.
Not to mention anybody else.
But so, for us, we have one unified vision, and I think that's really, really powerful. And it's kind of amazing what him and his office are able to accomplish in a year. It's, it's prolific. So.
Yeah, he's a sort of a volcano of creativity.
Yeah.
I have other things, but I've seen some very interesting things. These are questions that come from you. And so I wanted to start looking at this. There was one that I was particularly interested in. It's written very small. What type of content do you believe is going to be the most efficient in terms of connecting with the fluidity of Generation 2?
So I think, again, with younger audiences, and particularly the next generation coming through, authenticity is really, really important. So these generations have grown up with technology and mobile devices. You know, I think I got my first cell phone when I was, I don't know, maybe 16, when in the US you just start to drive. So it was more of like a safety thing, and I could only basically do a very
Call your
basic
parents.
text message, and there were no data plans. So, but it's completely different. And so I think they're becoming much more sophisticated at an early age with sifting through visual codes, visual, you know, anything visual, from a video to advertising content. And so I think the more authentic you are and the more fearless you are in sort of taking a stand.
Can you define fearless?
I mean, if you even think about what we do, sometimes it's, you know, moving away from classic beauty norms is in a way fearless. You know, that's a very prescriptive and prescribed way of looking at what beauty is. And so, you know, looking at all different sorts of people and all different sorts of looks and embracing them and, you know, showcasing them with your brand also becomes really, really powerful and fearless in a way. And so, you know, it's something as simple as that, you know, 15 years ago, it would be like, no, that model has to be perfectly airbrushed, like she cannot have any pores, like it's just...
It has to be white, slim and blonde.
Exactly, whereas, you know, today...
But is that thanks to Instagram or Facebook? I think it is, but maybe you have data that, I mean, that includes, I mean, everybody now is an actor, a celebrity in their own, you know, in their own ways, and so that's good. You know, there's body shapes and races and colors and styles, and everybody can do. And what Alessandro does, including in the stores, is that he gives you, his styling is particular, but then you go in the store and you can become very classic and wear it your own way. So is that what you guys are trying to demonstrate?
I think in many regards also, like, society is also changing, but it's also powered by this technology. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you identify with a certain group, like if I think about myself growing up where I grew up, you know.
Which is where?
I grew up in New York, and my community was all very, very similar. So if you were, you know, if you identified with a different group, you wouldn't be able to find them physically within your community. But now you could find them online and connect with all these people and find different communities and also learn about them and learn about people who you might identify with, who are empowering and have, you know, really positive things to say and viewpoints that you can also then, you know, gain some self-confidence from, or a creative light bulb. So that didn't exist 15 years ago, whereas for the next generation, it does. So I think you're also seeing that power of connectivity and idea sharing also making people more confident in the notion of self-expression. And it's sort of eroding some of these historical barriers. And the notion of self-expression that we've picked up at Gucci is really also really connected in that sense to what's happening in society. So it's a really good matchup.
The amazing thing that shows how right you are is that, I don't know if you know, but it happened very suddenly. So there was this change in top management, and from Frida Giannini to Alessandro Michele in the space of a men's show that was put together in 1 week. The image changed so radically that most of the wholesalers in the world were saying, oh, that's completely bonker, it will never sell, Gucci's dead, whatever, you know, now they all want Gucci. If they don't have it, they like threaten to commit suicide if they don't get it. But anyway, so the change was so radical, and yet it worked. And it worked, as Marco Bizzarri says, I have a brand with 20,000 voices, you know, and once you get your people believing in it, then it's 20,000 voices that can go out to 1,000 people each. And so the machine is very powerful, and thanks to, again, digital, it's faster. But then, so do you see what I mean? You were there during this change, and I'm really interested in knowing, you know, were you part of the people that were saying finally, or was it hard to get, you know, adapted to this incredible machine that now it's so much faster and so much richer?
So, okay. I'm
Sorry,
pretty
many
transparent as
one.
an American, but listen, any transition makes people nervous. So, a lot of people in the organization were meeting Marco for the first time. A lot of people in the organization already knew Alessandro and knew that he had a very, lovely personality that was super inclusive. So what people don't talk about so much about why we were able to move so quickly is also that almost all of us stayed the same group of people. So we were already working with each other. We just had a couple key changes at the top that sort of unlocked things. But then all the people, all the different frontline operators were the same. So we were able to run really, really fast. And then you also had an empowerment factor. So Marco moves incredibly fast, but also empowers people. So, I remember within a week's time, they also completely sort of redid our showroom so that when the new collection arrived in our showroom for our buyers, it looked completely different than it had in the past. So it looked like a brand new brand had sort of come there, and that just inspired all of our buyers who were coming to the showroom just by having, a different environment where they would be working. And it was a fast signal to the company. So all these things happened sequentially, really, really fast. And again, it was a bit of organized chaos because in that first year we were also figuring out, what are our new values? What do we mean? And
will it work?
Yeah. And there were also internally a lot of skeptics who, in the first few months might have been skeptical, but then fell in love with what we were doing like month 4, 5, 6, and now are, as always, in love with Gucci and what Alessandro does. But it also was an internal revolution in many regards. So.
That's very interesting. So, do you think it's more interesting to work for a fashion brand like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, or for another reality like SHOWstudio? So is that for me or for him? I think it's more for me, right? Sorry, but it's, may I?
Yes, of course. Do you want me to ask you the question?
It's fine. It's completely different. So one thing is being within, so in dealing with all what Jonathan just told us, your team, the codes of the brand, and communicating with consistency and working with your colleagues and stuff, and then suddenly you go out, and I still work with brands, smaller and mainly startups, but then you go out and you become a journalist, so you become that person that the brands want to please because they need you in a way, and so you get a different kind of power. So when you're the brand, you have the power to change things, especially when you're at a certain level. When you're the press, you have the power to actually inform, a new generation, to explain, to have an opinion on what's going on and say it. So SHOWstudio, it's a very small company. We are literally 15 people with a very visionary creative director, so Nick Knight, the photographer. We are on camera, so whatever we say, it's immediate. You say something that you didn't really want to say. We're very often live, so you learn to talk directly to your audience. But it's not about what's more interesting. It's really two types of life. What I thought interesting in my life was doing both. Actually, was going from one to the other and sometimes back. But back to Jonathan. That's also for me. I'm sorry. Okay, that's for you. In which stage of the customer journey you think, I think it means digital, ICTS, are more effective? So that's really marketing. So I guess you don't need explanation.
No, I mean, so for digital communications now, it really depends on your brand. So one of the things about a brand, and you were just talking about startups, do you have an awareness challenge? So Gucci, we don't have an awareness challenge. We're
Everybody knows
we're top of mind globally in almost all markets. So, you really have to understand where is your company within its life cycle to understand what your media mix should be. Mm-hmm. And then the next step is your customer's life cycle. Because first is, do customers even know about you? At Gucci, we don't have that challenge. So then the next step is, given where our customers are in their life cycle, what is the suite of of media and different customer touch points that we're using. And for us, you know, we are using almost all of them because wherever there's a conversation about our brand, and we'd like to sort of be guiding or leading it. So digital.
That's a very important point.
And it's important for all brand managers. Like if there's a conversation happening about your brand, your products, you want to be part of that conversation. So that's also why slowly, you know, our social media audience has grown around the world. We got very quickly sophisticated with our social media practices and content generation, social media advertising in Western markets, and then quickly expanded into Eastern markets. And now we have a broad portfolio of social media networks, and I think an audience of over 75 million just from social media.
And by social media, you mean the three main, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter?
But globally also, so WeChat and Kakao,
China.
Line. So when we aggregate everything around the world, it's over 75 million. So, you know,
it's a medium big country.
Yeah, it is, and those numbers have grown significantly over the last, you know, 4 or 5 years. So I do think in terms of at what point do you use digital communications, I would say it's an always on at this point. It's not something you decide, okay, I'm gonna activate it now. It's something that you should always have on. And the thing that's great about digital is that it can also be reactive. So you should be proactively planning when to use it around key brand or key business moments. But then you can also use it to be reactive. So if I have a product that's not performing as great as I would like it to have, because maybe there's an awareness issue, my customers don't know that that product has been launched. You can use digital, and within 2 or 3 weeks, you can, you know, service things.
When you're Gucci, when you have an audience of 75 million, so I guess...
No, but also
it's
with social advertising, you can also, you know, take any message and then target it to audiences. So, you know, are you going after your own audience, so our fans and followers on platforms, or, you know, we can basically target anyone within the social, depending on the platform, they have different targeting capabilities, but you can chase audiences digitally across different segments, geographies. It's really fun and fascinating, actually.
Do you have engineers that analyze data or
not engineers,
create algorithms? Or?
Yeah, we work with some teams that internally and externally that work on data algorithms for us. And, you know, my consumer analytics and insights team are they're really fascinaing people because... So
where do they come from professionally or
all different backgrounds.
training?
So some of them have more engineering background. Other ones are more like mathematic backgrounds. A lot of them, they spend their days looking at data. So you have to enjoy that as your day. So, you know, I'm always conscious when I'm recruiting someone like that, like they have to have fun with that.
So you have people that went to university, studied mathematics, and then they go and work for Gucci. That's pretty amazing, I think.
Or, you know,
that's a new world.
We also work, you know, with different consultants also and data scientists who support us and sort of can amplify our capabilities. So it's something we're actively working on with Caring too, which is our parent company, on, you know, how we better engage the data scientist community to unlock potentials that might not even be in our realm of awareness. So it's super fun too. So that's why having sort of these people who are like right brain, left brain, who can absorb the data and then like link it to, you know, not only the business, but also like the creative elements. That's really where the magic is happening. So
what's the role? Is there a role for AI in fashion, artificial intelligence?
Definitely. I think, so again, within luxury and fashion communications, you know, we have a set of rules and guidelines about, you know, what is it to be a luxury brand and how do you have a luxury conversation with your customers. So as long as you understand those elements, it's then about looking at the different technology opportunities around you and making sure that whatever is potentially presented to customers, it still doesn't violate those basic luxury tenets. And so AI could be used as something as simple for a page on your website to do product suggestions based on your browsing behavior. That could also translate to developing a learning algorithm that would, help optimize the content in your emails. But again, this is where you have the challenge of creative control versus sort of what could be a beautiful outcome from artificial intelligence. So our email campaigns, for example, an email we send to customers are highly curated. They're reviewed by a graphics department, a copy team, and our merchants review them to make sure the product assortment is right. If all of a sudden we start to use AI to customize that content to
they would not be as authentic.
A customer, we still have to go through that strict curation process. So if the machine is recommending this, does it still look beautiful? Because that, again, is something everyone expects from a luxury brand. So that's where you have to figure out when can the technology and sort of that creative element come together and find the right solution to be customer facing. And so those are the challenges of fashion, but that's also what's, for me, like more exciting. I'm really passionate about that. But if I was working for a car company, I'd be much less concerned about mixing and matching images of
unless it's Tesla or
yeah,
Ferrari.
exactly. But I'd be, or there are a lot of different companies where you could feel hospitality is a great example. Like if you had a portfolio of hotels, like if you had an e-card featuring an email featuring, 3 different hotel properties that were pulled together, based on an algorithm, you'd feel kind of safe. But for us, mixing and matching products from different seasons and different categories, it's much more, goes through that, again, curation process.
Very interesting. So, where do small upcoming brands fit in this scenario? Maybe we said that a little bit, but it would be nice to cover again. Is the current market a more fair place due to its digital transformation? I guess it means that if it's easier today for a brand that is born tomorrow to be, that's what I tend to do, and sometimes I believe it's not, but is it easier for a startup today, thanks to technology, to get recognized, known, successful?
I think it's always been super competitive in fashion and consumer products, and I don't think that's changed. So I think, you have a more democratic platform to access people and to also enable people to shop your brands. Like you don't need a physical store anymore. So there are a lot more democratic access points, but that also has opened up your competitive arena hugely. So, it is easier to potentially use more tools to get awareness, but now you're fighting against a lot more people. So I think what's happening is that the people who are really sophisticated in both, networking, relationship building offline, and then sophisticated in using the tools at their disposal, and at the same time have good product to sell, are able to sort of rise above the fold. But it's still a huge challenge, and I think it's hard for me to say if it's easier or not, but I think you just have to be much more sophisticated today to break through the noise.
I think democratic actually is the word, because everybody has a possibility much more than when you needed to start with 100 million, because otherwise, you couldn't have a store, you couldn't have a page in Famous Vogue, whatever. Today, you can start with really little money, but as you were saying, if you don't have a product that matters, there's so much stuff, there's so many things launched every year that are useless. We don't need them. There's too many already, that if you don't have a great idea and a great product that stands out, just don't bother. That's what I usually tell people, which is not very nice, but it's the reality. Like we don't need another black jacket, badly cat. We need an idea, we need a narrative, we need a story, we need something. An experience or something to aspire to that nobody else thought about. And then in that case, if you do it right, with the right channel, with the right language, and again, you're authentic, then yes, it is more democratic. Is it easier? No. You still need to be good. Do we have another 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here there is a question about the digital impact on business. So I don't know if that's what whoever asked that meant, but what about I mean, it's not really what you do, but what about the business side of fashion? How much have production, logistic, time to market, etc. changed? Is that whoever asked this question wanted to know? It's either a very shy person or they're not here.
I didn't do the question, but it's very important for me. How do you motivate through digital your wholesaler?
Your seller, your sales,
Wholesaler.
or wholesalers?
Well, so, I mean,
How do you talk to your wholesaler through?
Or how do you motivate in selling?
our wholesale.
Yeah.
Well, so the wholesalers make an investment in our inventory. So they're purchasing our inventory, and so they should already be financially incentivized to sell it. So if we're one of their biggest brands, which we normally are,
Yes.
they want to sell through the inventory their buyers have invested in globally. So they're already motivated to make sure that each season our product is selling. So they will feature Gucci prominently in their communication strategy, their editorial content. So the way the incentives within the wholesale system are already there, because if the wholesalers want to pay their rent and cover their operating costs, they have to sell our inventory. So luckily that incentive has already been in place. But what's happened is that each of the wholesalers now has developed their own brand identity, their way of developing content. And so, co-marketing in the past used to be editorial shoot in a catalog.
Or the name of the wholesaler on a page campaign.
Exactly.
So they were paying half of it, right?
And so now it's much different with digital. It's a much higher frequency, but and we can also sometimes work with a partner and co-invest to sort of echo or amplify a key message for our brand, because again, it comes down to audiences. So if we have a key message of a season that we want to tell, we can tell it on our own. But then if we work with really great partners, and they can then echo our messaging to their audiences. So sometimes we'll come in and we'll sort of spark the fire in that way. But back to your question, the wholesale accounts should be very motivated to already sell our product just because they're investing in the inventory.
Yes. I was also thinking that Gucci don't really have this problem. I mean, right now the brand is so hot in the real sense of the word. I mean, it sells itself almost without any, I mean, I know it's not true that it's without any effort, but the brand is so wanted that I guess you don't really need to incentivize wholesaler to take it and to sell it, or am I saying?
No, I mean, we are one of the top brands for a lot of our retail partners, but then, it's also really important for us to be in relevant and local specialty multi-brand boutiques. So these are relationships and partnerships that go both ways. It's important for us to have really strong partners, and also partners we trust in, because customers don't distinguish where your brand is being featured. We're Gucci everywhere. So whether it's a fragrance Gucci counter in the department store, or whether you're in our in one of our flagship stores, or whether you're shopping online with our brand, there has to be a degree of consistency. And I think that's also when choosing partners, it becomes really essential that, these are really good relationships.
Yeah, because the e-commerce, like the wholesale e-commerce, not your own.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're Gucci, you can have a little introduction, paragraph, whatever, some photos, but then the product is photographed the way that the e-commerce do, right? So if you're on Matches or Net-a-Porter or whatever, My Theresa, then it's their way of displaying your product.
Yeah, and it's the same way, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if a buyer was coming to our showroom and they had a multi-brand boutique and we didn't think it was qualitative enough,
You would say no.
You would say no. So like within just the same way you would evaluate a physical store, you evaluate a website. Is there e-commerce photography up to our standards? If, you know, how are they showing their product grids on their website? If it's a mess, like we don't want to be in the mess. So, you know, so it's the same thing. You evaluate the quality of, you know, their business and their business practices, and making sure that it's also aligned with, you know, our brand and our aesthetics, and, you know, also down to the brand mix. Are we the only luxury brand, or are they carrying, you know,
Are you in the right mix?
Exactly. So.
Well, I have a question here that it's a little bit pressure on us, because it's about studying or not, and we are in a university, don't forget. So it says, from a professional point of view, do you believe that having a master degree in digital fashion communication is more valuable than having 2 years of experience in the field of digital?
So I went back
Naughty question.
I went back to get my MBA, and I studied luxury marketing and strategy. And so I also used those 2 years to intern, to research, and to work with all these different companies. So there is such a huge value in learning and being in a learning environment, absorbing different ideas and different concepts, and also having 2 years to network and evaluate, you know, all these different businesses. So that in and of itself, it's so hard to do once you're working and you're busy. So taking the time apart to also then be a little bit more thoughtful about what your next steps are is hugely valuable. And so I do think just being in a sort of a learning environment is not something to ever regret. And also, it's hard to measure how valuable it is in the moment. So you will probably, like 5 years away, be like, oh, that was hugely instrumental for me. But, you know, in the moment, you're like, oh, you're very conscious of the opportunity cost. Oh, I could be here, I could be there, I could be doing this. But I think also continuing education is, I talk about this a lot with some of my colleagues. Like, it's really weird that once you start working that you stop learning. Like, I would love to be taking a course every 6 months and continuing to get smarter in different subject matter areas. I can't do that with how I travel half the time for work. But now with like e-learning, I could probably do it. I'm trying to study for my Italian driver's license. So
this man lives in Milan and doesn't speak Italian.
So that's taking up my time. But the notion of continuing education is so important and something you should always keep with you.
I'm with you, and I absolutely adore learning. But I do think that once you work and once you are in the workforce, you can still learn in a different way. No. So maybe you don't really go to university courses, but even for me, interviewing someone or being interviewed is learning, because you find out things that you didn't think about. But also, you know, going to conferences. Sometimes I go to scientific conferences, and there's something to learn, even if it's nothing I work with, or going to the cinema, reading books, reading the press. I think there's learning everywhere. When I was a student, there were no courses in digital communication, because, by the way, it didn't exist. But there were no courses in communication, so we were all studying something else and then become communicators by chance or by trade or by whatever. I learned everything I know about fashion and communication by doing it. And I'm not saying it's right, but if you're a sponge, and if you listen, and if you observe, and if you go to things like this, then you learn. And I think when a university offers you the possibility to have someone with the experience of Jonathan telling you things from within, that's quite amazing. And that's why I wish I had that when I was your age, some of your age. So I think both are valuable. Yeah. I think interning also, I'm a bit against in having people working for too long for free, but I think interning in a company that really take it as a teaching environment, it's invaluable. You can choose your mentors. It doesn't have to be your boss. It can be someone else. But also having a mentor, I think it's invaluable. That
I could not agree with more. I've been very fortunate in having 3 different mentors throughout my career who've been really instrumental in everything I've accomplished. So yes. Finding a mentor is a bit of luck, but also it's pivotal. And you can look for them. So.
Exactly. It's your responsibility to find them. How much time do we have? 5 minutes?
Yeah, up to 10 minutes, yeah.
Wow, that's a long one. The piece of clothing, and so the material is essential, since it embodies the narrative, and it's not that I can't read, but it's handwritten, so it's not easy. The narrative, and that's the point where the communication starts, okay? So from the product. How to convey meanings and develop digital communication, keeping the importance of the materiality. How to render it. I don't know. One.
Well, no. So I have a very specific viewpoint about this, and this was also part of like the change in brand positioning. So in luxury, the quality factor is pretty consistent across our competitive set. Each of us is stronger in maybe one category or another, or has a longer history versus another, but the quality of the products is really, really high. So you're not going to have a competitively differentiated story if you're going in on quality. All of us can fight pretty strongly on that front. So I always say that story about construction, materiality, and quality is always not your first foot in the door, because you won't be differentiated. It's a story that everybody has. We can all tell it, and some of these houses have been around for hundreds of years, and those stories are really rich, and certain customers actually really do relate to that story quite well. But I would say as a general strategy, when you're thinking about what do I communicate on first, you always want to think about it also in the back of your mind, like, is this competitively differentiated? And so the quality piece should always be there in luxury, but I've always argued that it shouldn't be the first story you want to tell to customers.
It's like a taken.
Yeah, and I'm not everyone agrees with me on that, but I've strongly believed in that.
I do believe that in luxury you need a certain amount of artisanal or whatever skills, or some categories more than others, like haute horlogerie, the complicated watches. If you don't know how to make it, you can make it. A little bit more difficult than a shirt. And I think, as you said very well, that those campaigns where you see, someone stitching a bag or, whatever doing with the jacket, it's a little bit boring today. I think telling a story and making you part of an environment that pleases you, or making you part of something fun or entertaining or moving, it's probably more interesting, because you probably go to a luxury store if you have the money for that and expect some quality, right? Well, I think this is it. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.